US and Iran have achieved a big breakthrough in their peace talks over the war in West Asia. Both sides have confirmed that they have arrived at a tentative deal to bring this war to an end. So in this important video, let's understand what does it mean for the blockade at Hormuz? What are the terms of this deal? What does it mean for the global economy? And more importantly, what does it mean for Iran's nuclear program, which was the very premise on which US and Israel went to war against Iran? But before we start the discussion, what if I told you that this is not exactly a peace deal or a peace treaty as the media is projecting it to be? So just wait till the end of the video to understand why this is not exactly a peace deal. So, in the early hours of Monday, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, and Iranian state media also confirmed that US and Iran have agreed to a draft MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, that consists of several points that satisfies some of the interests of both US and Iran to bring this war to an end. However, the deal will take effect only from Friday, 19th of June, when the MOU is going to be signed in Geneva, Switzerland. Switzerland, being a neutral country in geopolitics, has been chosen as the location for the signing of the deal. Pakistan, which has been acting as the mediator, has also confirmed that US Iran have made this breakthrough, and very soon the MOU is going to be signed. Now, what exactly are the terms of this agreement? Now, when you look at the official statements from US and Iran, very little information is available from both sides. And in fact, both sides have a diverging position on several points even now. That's what raises a lot of questions on the survivability of this deal. But however, if you look at the 14-point Memorandum of Understanding published by Iranian state media, which is pending official verification, we get a fair idea as to what could be a part of this MOU, which might be signed on this Friday, on the 19th of June. Plus, if you look at statements from President Trump and the White House, we again get a clear indication as to what could be part of this agreement. First and foremost, Iran and US have agreed to stop the fighting, to stop the war on all the fronts, including Lebanon. Iran has always made it clear that Lebanon is a red line that Israel has been crossing repeatedly, especially with the recent Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon. So both US and Iran reportedly have committed that the war will end on all the fronts, be it against Iran or its proxies in Yemen, in Lebanon, and across the region. The fighting will completely come to a halt with a permanent ceasefire being established between US and Iran. The US has committed not to interfere with Iran's internal affairs going forward. But please mind you, this is an Iranian claim. As I said, the 14-point MOU that you're seeing being circulated on media is primarily the account of Iranian state media. What US has confirmed is that the war is going to end, and according to Trump, the blockade at Hormuz will be completely lifted with no permanent toll, and he has called upon global shipping industry to start shipping oil again through the Hormuz Strait. This is what is officially confirmed. But when you look at the accounts of the Iranian state media, they're claiming that the US has agreed not to interfere going forward in Iran's internal affairs. So how far will it be true? That's something we need to wait and watch. Then, according to the claims, the US will not only lift the blockade in another 30 days and Hormuz would be thrown completely open for global shipping. Along with that, the US has reportedly committed to withdraw all its forces from Iran and in the region around West Asia and the Persian Gulf. Reportedly, once Hormuz is opened, as per Iranian arrangements, Iran will levy no toll over the passage of vessels as claimed by Donald Trump, and US and its allies, which is a reference to the European partners of US, are likely to have committed to arrange a reconstruction plan to the tune of $300 billion to compensate Iran and to facilitate the reconstruction plan following the massive destruction of its civilian infrastructure caused by the attacks of US and Israel. Then, apparently, the US has also committed to end all the sanctions on Iran, especially on its petrochemical and oil industry. This could help revive the Iranian economy, which has been crippled for years because of the American sanctions. Then, Iran is yet to make a solid commitment with regard to its nuclear weapons program. In fact, as part of this MOU, there are no commitments that Iran is going to make with regard to the nuclear program. However, Iran is expected to make a commitment. There is a 60-day period that both sides have agreed upon to work out the final deal on the nuclear program, which will eventually decide the fate of the nuclear program of Iran. Then US has also reportedly committed to not increase its forces in the West Asia region and not impose any new economic sanctions on Iran. So as you can see, the deal or the MOU makes no direct mention of the nuclear program itself. The nuclear question has been deferred by 60 days. Once the deal takes effect on 19th June, once it is signed in Geneva this Friday, from there, the 60-day window will begin, where US Iran will continue the negotiations to work out an agreement regarding Iran's nuclear program. That's why I said this is not exactly a peace deal as the media is projecting it to be. Though it will bring the war to an end for now, it might lift the blockade at Hormuz. There are many red flags. There are many concerns which could easily derail this agreement as well. In fact, on day one of announcement, lot of points of divergence can be seen in the Iranian statements and the American statements. Take, for example, Iran's claim that US is going to defreeze $24 billion of frozen assets. Reportedly, Iran also has placed a condition that for the nuclear talks to begin and conclude within the 60-day period, at least half of it, that is around $12 billion in frozen assets, they must be defreezed by the US by lifting the sanctions. That's what Iran is claiming. Iran has said this is a condition that if we have to talk about the nuclear program and work out a deal in the next 60 days, then US will have to release these frozen assets to the tune of $24 billion, with 50% being released immediately, or else the talks will not begin over the nuclear program. So that itself places a big question mark on this entire deal. The second major concern is the fighting which has continued in Lebanon. Just hours before Trump posted on social media and Iran made the announcement, Israel continued its attacks in Beirut. And reportedly, this enraged Donald Trump, who's craving for a deal to exit from this war. And he has lashed out at Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, criticizing him as a very difficult guy to deal with. Because the US has been warning Israel to not escalate the conflict and allow diplomacy to take over to bring this war to an end. So this again brings a lot of questions about what Israel is trying to do, whether the US can rein in Israel, or can Israel, it can still play spoil sport to derail the entire deal itself. The other big question is about Pakistan. What is our dear neighbor doing? Pakistan was claiming to be the key mediator, the negotiator of this deal. It did hold the Islamabad talks. It did play a role in working out the initial ceasefire. But however, it's very clear now that Pakistan has been largely sidelined. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and the Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar, they both posted on social media claiming credit for the deal which has been worked out, thanking other allies like Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia and others. But please note, the deal is not being signed in Islamabad. Pakistan would have loved to host the signing process and name it the Islamabad peace process. So this would have added more credibility to Pakistan's role as a credible negotiator and mediator. But as things stand today, US and Iran have agreed to sign the deal in Geneva. They want a neutral location. And it again shows that Pakistan's role was more of a relayer of messages, right? It was basically taking messages from the American side, transmitting it to Tehran, taking messages from the Iranian side, transmitting it to Washington. So Pakistan's role has again become very clear that it's not been in a position to push the talks in a certain direction. It has not been in a position of leverage to convince Iran to make concessions or to convince US to end the war. Rather, it was just a conduit, just a middleman to transmit the messages between both sides. And that comes as a setback for Pakistan as well. Now, if you look at global markets, immediately after the announcement, as expected, the oil prices have fallen dramatically from the peak of more than $110 per barrel during the February month and the March month period when the war had started. Today, the prices have dropped to under $90, going towards $80 per barrel. Parallelly, the stock markets are flying across the world. What's curious and interesting is that every time such big announcements come in the context of US Iran conflict, it has always been on the weekend. Almost it appears as if they're timing the markets. Again, that's a separate issue altogether. But the news has been taken very positively by the markets. This is something the global economy was craving for, particularly the lifting of blockade at Hormuz. As you know, Hormuz carries 20% of global oil supplies, significant amount of global gas supplies, and as well as global commodity supply chains had taken a massive hit. So this will bring a lot of benefits for oil gas industry, for the aviation industry, which had taken a massive hit, for the commodity sector. And accordingly, the Indian markets also have reacted very positively as they opened in the morning hours of Monday. The stocks have jumped of most of the companies which have interest in West Asian market, and specific industries, oil, gas, energy, aviation, and other key sectors stand to gain and benefit. This could ease the pressure on our exports. It could make it easier for India to secure its key imports of energy supplies and key commodities, which are vital for industries like fertilizer and other important sectors. Now, the big question has not been addressed in this proposed deal at all. That is the nuclear question. Iran is said to possess around 440, 450 kilograms of enriched uranium, which is highly enriched, up to 60%. According to experts, from this stage of highly enriched uranium, it will take hardly few days to few weeks to enrich this to weapons grade uranium. So basically, Iran has been one step away from acquiring weapons grade fissile material. And once weapons grade uranium is produced, let's say in a few days or few weeks, from here, Iran could take probably a few more weeks and months to develop actual warheads. And as you know, Iran has the delivery systems, at least to impose its deterrence across the immediate neighborhood. Now, what will happen to these nuclear stockpiles is the big question. Trump has been claiming since last year, since Operation Midnight Hammer of 2025, that US had decimated Iran's nuclear stockpile to nuclear dust. He keeps calling it nuclear dust. Reportedly, there were plans by US armed forces to try and seize the stockpile, and Iran was taking countermeasures as well. So now, this question remains unaddressed. Iran reportedly has just offered to dilute the stockpile on its own without handing over the stockpile to some other country. US reportedly has placed a condition that Iran should give a guarantee as part of the nuclear deal, which might be worked out in another 60-day period. Iran should commit to not enrich uranium for 20 more years, for 2 decades. But other sources indicate Iran is offering only a 10-year pause on enrichment. Now, how far are these claims true? Again, nobody can verify this unless and until there is some official confirmation. But one thing is very clear, this MOU, which is going to be signed this Friday, hopefully, will not address the nuclear question at all. It will just begin the 60-day window during which further talks will take place, depending on which a US Iran nuclear deal might be worked out. But Trump has been prematurely claiming that his deal is better than the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action of 2015, that was worked out by President Obama. But again, you know how Trump thinks, how Trump makes statements. But right now, the bigger concern is that this agreement is not a peace deal at all. It may bring the war to an end as of now, right? There is no guaranteed commitments. The terms are still not clear. More importantly, the key party to the conflict, that is Israel, is not on board this deal. This is more of a MOU. It's a memorandum of understanding, right? That becomes very clear from Iranian statements that this is not a peace treaty. It's not a full and final treaty which will permanently settle the conflict. It's not even addressing the core question, which is the nuclear question. So this MOU might be a new temporary arrangement that could halt the war for now, but any escalation from any of the parties could potentially trigger the war again. There are many, you know, loopholes which are present over here. And given Israel's military aggression and Netanyahu's inclination to keep targeting Iran and its proxies, there is every possibility that this whole deal might collapse in another few weeks. Israel not being party to it and continued Israeli attacks on Lebanon is the biggest red flag. Iran has said attacks on Lebanon is the red line, that war should stop on all the fronts, without which Iran is unlikely to commit to the deal. Even if they sign the deal this Friday, if Israel continues attacking Lebanon and other Iranian proxies in the region, Iran might retaliate as well. So there are multiple points where the deal could completely fail and collapse. And this brings us to the harsh reality, the reality of declining American military and strategic power, and the strategic and tactical victory that Iran has gained in this conflict. Despite America's military superiority, despite the military capabilities of Israel, and despite decapitating Iranian leadership and carrying out significant damage to Iran's infrastructure, eventually the strategic upper hand is with Iran. Right? Most experts agree that Iran has turned this situation into an advantageous position. Because, see, compared to 27th Feb and today, honestly, nothing has changed apart from the unnecessary war and the several lives that were lost. Apart from the chaos that we saw because of the war and the conflict initiated by Trump and Netanyahu, nothing else has changed on the ground. Even on 27th Feb, before the war started, Iran was making similar commitments. It was showing the willingness to sign the deal in Geneva with US. Even then, their commitment was that we will address the stockpile issue. We may not hand it over, but we might dilute the stockpile. Iran probably was agreeing to a pause on enrichment for a few years. Now, if they are arriving at the same deal, then what was the point of this entire conflict? So this weakens American leverage. It marks the decline of US as a global superpower. See, US always had two big leverages in West Asia. One was its nuclear weapons and its conventional military superiority because of its large number of military bases in the region. The second big leverage US had was the power of sanctions. That is what crippled Iran's economy and slowed down Iran's nuclear program. Now, if Trump has actually agreed, if he has indeed committed to lift all the sanctions, defreeze Iranian accounts, this will enable Iran, and eventually Iran will seek the path of nuclear weapons. Now, with its leadership eliminated, the new brand of leaders will decide that Iran needs to have a nuclear weapon to deter Israel and US in the future. If not tomorrow, in the coming months, in the coming years, Iran is likely to go back on the path if the funds are defreezed and if the sanctions are lifted. This takes away the American leverage. And the American military superiority, though it managed to cause significant damage to Iran, Iran has also counter retaliated, hitting multiple American military bases, causing significant damage and losses, crippling the entire economy of the region with a barrage of rockets and drones. This establishes Iran's unconventional hybrid tactics and the leverage it has used at Hormuz by holding a chokehold on the global economy. So, in any way you look at this, in any perspective, Iran seems to have gained a strategic and tactical upper hand, and it appears that the deal is also going in Iran's favor. Now, I'm sure you might guess who will be unhappy with such a deal. If the deal appears to slightly align with Iranian interests, and US is making a compromise to get out of this conflict, there is one country which will be furious about this, that is Israel. It doesn't align with Benjamin Netanyahu's vision for Israel. So, we have already seen a negative reaction coming in from Israel, and Israel is not even party to the deal, as I said. So, there is every possibility that Israel's uncontrolled military aggression might continue, right? And any Israeli attack on Lebanon or Iran or any of its proxies, or continued Israeli covert war in the region, could become the new flashpoint, and Iran could escalate the conflict from there. Then we also have Trump's notorious temperamental mindset, his volatile thinking, his egotist personality, narcissist personality, and erratic policies. Every day he says something different, right? And his statements keep changing every few hours, and you don't know what to believe, what not to believe, right? He truly follows the madman theory. So this makes the deal all the more vulnerable. Next week, maybe Trump will have a change of his mind. Because according to several reports, believe it or not, Trump wanted the deal to be announced at any cost on his 80th birthday. That again shows his egotist behavior. And Iran delayed this at the last minute, right? In Iranian time, the deal was announced the next day after Trump's birthday. But in American time, the deal was announced on Trump's 80th birthday, just before he hosted the UFC event. So Trump had made a big deal about the UFC event. He wanted to make a big announcement and he wanted a deal at any cost. So tomorrow he might change his mind once the birthday is over. And also don't forget, Iran is equally guilty. Iran's continued destabilization of the region, sponsorship of radical extremist proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran trying to reactivate its nuclear enrichment program, could all threaten the deal that Trump and Iran are announcing today. Now, this is the interesting development. According to sources in the White House, Trump badly wanted the deal on his birthday, but Iran managed to delay it. And as per Iran's time, it was announced on Monday morning, but in US it was still Sunday night, the 80th birthday of Trump, and it came just hours before he hosted the UFC event. This shows how geopolitics has changed from being a relationship of mature leaders to temperamental leaders driven by personal interests. And it brings up the question of Israel, which can always play spoil sport. And as I said, Trump is also furious with Netanyahu, and America's ability to reign in Israel is also quite limited. So it all depends on a number of variable factors. That's why I said this is not a peace deal per se. It's not like a permanent peace treaty of sorts. It can break at any time, right? Who knows? The deal may not even be signed this Friday. By then, something else might happen, right? So treat this announcement with a pinch of salt, be realistic, and understand as to what dynamics are influencing these developments. So, what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments. Do you think the deal will last? Do you think Iran will gain the upper hand? Or do you think Israel will do something else to try and continue the conflict? Let me know in the comments. So, that is it. Thanks for watching.